guys. Hey guys, hopefully you can hear me at the back. So I'm going to talk a bit about Highly Available Foreman. There's a lot of decisions you have to make, a lot of choices. Hopefully you'll be able to go away and build a cluster yourself in the future. So this is visually what we're kind of working off. So right at the top there, you've got I've got a PostgreSQL database. You could obviously use MySQL or something else. I'm not going to cover kind of clustering SQL. The Postgres guys did a really good talk about replication yesterday. If you didn't see it, look at the recording. It's really good. So then you're going to have your load balancers because you've got a cluster of databases hopefully there. You're going to have your Foreman applications there. That will scale up quite well. My diagram has 3. Yours might have 4 or 5, whatever. You have load balancers there. Just underneath, that's everything that wants to talk to the Foreman application would go via the load balancers. So you see my laptop there. And the smart proxies also would go via the load balancers into the Foreman load balancers to the applications. And then down the bottom, I've got 2 separate smart proxy clusters. My laptop, I've only actually got 1 set up and ready to go because it's a laptop. But you could set up more. And then underneath the load balancers, underneath the smart proxies, you have load balancers. And the blue things down there, they are meant to be clients, and they would connect into the smart proxies. So the Foreman application. So each node, obviously, you're going to have the same SSL certs. If you've got different SSL certs on each node, you're going to have issues if you go via load balancer. And one day you get one, the next day you get another. Let's keep them all kind of configured in the same way, same certs. Use DNS alt names. So you might have your node 1, your node 2, your node 3, and then your name that you might be foreman.example.com or whatever it is. You're going to assign them, make sure all names are signed so you can test firstly, connect, but you're all going to forcefully connect to one single node, or you connect to any. There's a little file there as well, encryptionkey.rb. Not many people might know about this, but this is used to encrypt passwords in the database. So each node needs to have the same key in there, or whichever one writes into the database is going to be able to read the other nodes, so keep them all the same. There's also another directory, a file there, local secret token. That's used for signing cookies. So if you've got one session open, and then a server goes down, and you suddenly get redirected to the next server, because the cookies are all valid for the users. There's also some settings. So Foreman URL is normally used in the provisioning templates. That's for the clients to connect back to Foreman to say, okay, we're built, or there's a couple other uses as well. That needs to obviously go by the load balancer. That defaults to the FQDN of the first node that sees the database. So you're going to have to change that manually afterwards. Unattended URL, similar sort of thing. Actually, I think unattended URL is used in templates. Full URL, I can't remember, but change it. Foreman Memcache plugin. So we've got a plugin that will connect to Memcache, store user sessions. Very similar to for the local secret token for the cookies. When one server goes down, you obviously want to be able to, your users, that to be kind of transparent to your users. So when one server goes down, you connect to the next one, and the users have just no idea. Again, it can scale horizontally, so go back, we can have 3, 4, 5, 10. Don't go crazy. No need to go crazy, hopefully. Also, you could use the same principles as well, not just for scaling for HA, scaling just for scale, because you want to have multiple nodes. You may not even care about availability, but you just have a bit larger state. So the smart proxies. Each node has to have the same SSL certificates, again, for the same reasons. So there's 2 sets of certificates here. So Foreman proxy is a service that the Foreman applications will connect to the proxy to do stuff like create DHCP releases. There's a couple of other things as well. Get data out Puppet. Foreman needs to trust those certs. So if on the Foreman servers, they're obviously going to be using the same certs, or come from maybe a CA, you're going to generate those certs, obviously using DNS alt names. So you can see there, the first one I've got CentOS 7 Foreman Smart Proxy. That's my name for my smart proxy cluster. I've got DNS alt names. It's got number 1 and number 2 on them as well. So there, so I can always just make sure I'm hitting one if I want to test. Puppets. So again, each node uses the same SSL certificates. Generally, you would generate these, let Puppet generate these as part of the installer. Sorry. Obviously, your Puppet modules, they need to be the same on both nodes, or 3 or 4, whatever nodes they are. If you've got different nodes on, or different versions of Puppet modules on different nodes, when your clients are going to get different things back potentially, whichever node they hit, this would be bad. Let's make sure that that's all good. So R10K is a really good tool for that. I haven't set up R10K on my laptop. I've just, as a demo, I've just installed one module. That should work. Again, you've got an option as well for SRV records. So the Puppet agent in the Puppet config file, you can set which is the Puppet master. I've set that to my smart proxy, the load balancing address. You could set that to use SRV records, so you could change that dynamically quite easily without going around to your machines. Maybe you might have hundreds of machines and you don't want to change that manually, because normally obviously you do that by Puppet, but if Puppet isn't working because your masters are down, you have a bit of an issue. SRV records are a really good way to go as well. Puppet CA. So my first question is, like, do you really need kind of high availability with Puppet CA? So when the Puppet CA is down, the only thing you can't do is deploy new nodes, so sign certs. So that's probably not an issue, hopefully. It might be an issue, but let's keep things simple if you can. So maybe just have one node as your CA, and in your Puppet.conf you can say this one node is my CA server, but use the load balancing address, which can go to either of those two for the master, for the catalog. A couple of thoughts I've had about if you want to have highly available Puppet CA. So just mirroring etc Puppet Labs, Puppet SSL, just mirroring that directory between the two servers, having the Puppet CA service enabled. Should work as well. You can use cron, you can use rsync, iNotify, and I think GFS2 would probably work quite well here. Like, you know, the certs are small, but they won't change very often depending on how kind of often you deploy nodes. There's a couple of options. Obviously, you can use shared storage. I really don't like shared storage because you just move the problem away from the application to somewhere else. Yeah, you can have highly available storage, but just avoid it. Keep things simple if you can. Again, you can use SRV records. So if you've got a Puppet CA server set to smartproxy1.example.com, you lose that server and you want to point it to 2. So you have your certs and you put them on 2, and you want to point to 2. You can just change the SRV record, and again, you just don't have to go around to multiple machines all the time. That's just going to be a massive pain in the arse, like I said. So a couple of lessons learned about my experience doing this. So a lot of these actually apply to any kind of highly available system. Use configuration management for that system. If you've got kind of multiple Foreman application nodes, having to change something manually on 1, 2, and then 3, you're not going to do it. You forget. It's error prone. Use config management, whatever you want to use. I don't care. I use Ansible. Don't terminate SSL on the load balancers. I think this is probably possible. I think it's really complicated. Foreman has some really good documentation, but there isn't that much about terminating SSL outside of Foreman. But you probably could. I just kept things simple, but tried to anyway. So I don't know how much you guys know about Rails, but part of the install of Foreman, it runs rake db seed and db migrate. These migrate the databases or put data on the database. You don't need to run this on every single of the 3 nodes or however many you have. You only need to run it on 1. So don't need to run it on 1. Just 1. So set that flag to false on the installer. You can easily So if you have lots of plugins, for example, it can take a long time. If you're using the packages, I think the RPM packages and then the Debian packages, they run db rake and db seed and db migrate. So I think we should probably change that, but for now that's going to be an issue. But hopefully, depending on your size of how long that takes, it might not be too much of an issue. Clear tasks kind of frequently and often, so again it kind of relates to scale. Not necessarily H8, but all the tasks, if you're using Foreman tasks anyway, is stored in the database. They don't get deleted, I don't think, by default. So I added a cron job in there just to delete them after 30 days. If you have a massive table full of like millions of tasks that you don't ever look at, it's unnecessary. It can cause problems with the database, maybe. Just get rid of it. Tuning. So you've got a couple of tuning things for Postgres and Apache, just to make your cluster run more smoothly. Let's not going to go into this too deeply. So this is some of the Ansible that I use to do it. So hopefully you guys can see that. At the top I've got my two hosts. They're my two Foreman application nodes. In my diagram I had 3 at the start. I only have 2. So if we just skip the first few, because that's a scenario if you're using the installer. Hopefully you guys are all using the installer and not doing things manually, because the installer is really good and easy to use. So there's an encryption key variable, and that will ensure that all my nodes have the same encryption key. And then you've got a new hash, Foreman installer scenario answers. So this roughly translates to, if you're using the installer and you've got hyphen name hyphen a variable name. So this translates. So if you look at the first one, that Foreman and then Foreman URL would translate to Foreman URL on the installer. Storing this way in Ansible makes the installer, it knows when it needs to run and when it doesn't need to run. Otherwise it's really hard to work out. So there's lots of variables in there. Foreman URL is just set to my load balancing address, because I don't want that default into the FQDN. Server name is using Apache and the vhost config. Admin password, DBhost, that's my DB cluster, my database cluster, various database passwords, usernames. OAuth key, OAuth secret, they need to be the same on all the nodes. Foreman proxy, or the smart proxy, they use OAuth to authenticate to Foreman. So again, if each node has them differently, the Foreman proxies are only going to be able to authenticate to 1 or maybe 2. So make sure that variable that is the same on all your nodes. Puppet, DNS alt names. I use Puppet to generate certificates, so I just set that. If you've got certificates coming from an external CA, you don't worry about that. Foreman Memcache plugin, so that configures Memcache. I've pointed it to my Memcache hosts. I set a namespace until it expires. Yeah, I've installed Memcache on my application nodes as well. You don't have to. I did, just made it easier. Some of you may notice the thing that's missing on that one. I mentioned before about there's a file, local secret token.rb. That file isn't in that Ansible role, but I'm going to do that in future. So I migrate that manually, but don't do that. So this is my smart proxy cluster, similar sort of thing. So I've got an installer scenario. That scenario doesn't actually exist. I wrote it myself. It's just like one file, really simple to do. Hopefully future versions will have a smart proxy scenario in. Again, answers again. So Foreman -proxy -Foreman -base -URL if you're using the installer manually. I'm going to set that to my Foreman cluster, which is going to be the load balancer. Trusted hosts. So I've probably got a bit overkill there, but I'm set to trust all of the smart proxies in its cluster and the Foreman nodes that I have. You shouldn't need to trust the other smart proxies. So, for example, smart proxy 2 wouldn't be needed on smart proxy 1, but this made it simple, same config, nice and easy. OAuth consumer key and OAuth consumer secret. That's going to be the same that I had on the previous slide to match, so that's how they're used to authenticate. SSL cert, SSL key, SSL CA, they're the certificates that you run. If you're using your own CA, obviously you're not going to get them from here, but I'm using self-signed certificates. So when you run that command, the Puppet search generates on one of the Foreman nodes, you'll get given certificates, and they're the certificates you get passed in there. Template URL, again, defaults to FQDN. You want it to use the load balancer at the bottom, so that's for the clients. Foreman URL, obviously that's going to be the load balancing address. Server cert name. You don't have to set that; it's just a name. But I like to make it the name, the load balancing address, and I've got the two nodes behind that, and then DNS subnames again. So I'll talk to you a bit about the future in a minute. But does anyone want to see a demo? I can shut down my nodes and see what happens. Can you see that? So this is my, so truth be told, I haven't got a load balancer on this machine. I'm using a very primitive source of load balancing, which is host files to direct which node I go to. Obviously you're not going to do that. So here, I'm hitting so it's this one here, so it's 29, which is node 1. You can see here that I can kind of go here, I can do stuff, I'm logged in, I can go around the UI. As a user, if then my Foreman 1 node dies, I'm just going to stop Apache. In fact, I don't actually really need to do that because I can just zip it. So if that node dies, it gets taken out the pool by the load balancer. I'm now pointed to the new node, and you can see here it doesn't work. Brilliant. Brilliant. Interesting. Right, sorry guys. There you go. Don't know, I didn't change anything, hopefully you guys saw, but it's delay there. But you can see that my session is still valid, I don't have to log in again, my cookies are valid. To the user, hopefully, if you're using a load balancer, that would be seamless. And I'm just going to show you from the clients as well. So sorry about this. So you can see in this on the client, I've got Puppet configured. server and also the CA server is that one at that address. So it hasn't got a 1 or a 2 in, it's the load balancing address. If you look at the host file, that's 3, which is smart proxy 2. So if we then, let's run that provision. ST. Hopefully it'll connect quite nicely. I think it might make some NTP changes actually. Yeah, so it's started the NTP service. But again, nothing will happen if we if we change that now to so now I'm going to point that to smart proxy 1, just change the IP, Papa 81's T, nothing's going to change again, hopefully, but to prove that I have got the same catalog, if I, for example, if I stop NGP, and we get the catalog, we should restart NTP, because the smart proxy should then talk to Foreman and get data from the ENC. Whatever you hit, it's the same. Again, in this scenario, if the CA server goes down, you can't deploy new certificates. You can't, sign new certificates, so you can't deploy servers. But it helps with HA, obviously, if you don't care about that part of it. So in the future, we want kind of provisioning. I would like to see provisioning done. So DHCP, the default DHCP daemon that we use, does support a kind of secondary and primary server. I would like to see us be able to kind of provision in a highly available manner. So Foreman will configure DHCP and on both nodes. So both of the smart proxies could respond to the DHCP and receive any DHCP requests that are given. Again, TFTP could be quite simple. Foreman would just need to know that these smart proxies here are in a cluster. That's not currently possible within Foreman. So they'll need to know. Foreman needs to know that. So when you deploy a new host, it can copy those any files that you're going to serve over TFTP to both nodes, and not just the one that it knows thinks it's going to use. Discovery, I think they need small changes in there. If you guys use Discovery, there may be kind of dragons with other plugins, but I think on the whole, it should kind of mostly work. And then Catello, I don't know if you guys use Catello. We need to kind of move that to use split deployments, we're calling. So Catello is made up of multiple components. So you've got Pulp, you've got the Foreman application, you've got Candlepin, you've got Cupids. There's like 5 or 6 different components. Being able to split those out into different nodes and then make those nodes independently highly available would be really nice. Also super cool if you want to start using containers, containerizing Foreman or Catello. I think kind of HA and containers are kind of a must, really. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Go. Yeah. Yes, you can do that as well. Yeah. Yeah, they are quite good. Yeah. Yeah, you can do that as well. That's one of the nice features. Probably that would be better than directly kind of getting Ansible to call Puppet, which is a bit kind of weird. Yeah, that's a super nice thing. Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is about upgrades. Not related really to your question, but when you upgrade, you can hopefully upgrade one node. If you can upgrade one node and then run the DB rake on, so if you've got 3 nodes, you upgrade one so the UI is now 1 to version 2 or whatever the version is. You run upgrade to secondary node. That will upgrade the UI and it will run the DB rake, seed, migrate. You've now then got 2 nodes in your cluster that are the new version and the database is the new version, and then you just have to upgrade the 3rd one. So if you can do that nicely and time taking the nodes in and out of the load balancer, well, you can get almost close to zero downtime when you do upgrades. But definitely, yeah, Foreman's not, yeah. The only thing is obviously you have to have another puppet master, which some people might not want. So, yeah, definitely. On, sorry.
So you do mixing out. Is that, do you have plans to?
Sorry?
Is it going out because it's the same logic as why you won't be able to build a service that doesn't matter?
So, I mean, the question was about Puppet CA and making that highly available. So, I think initially it's kind of low on the requirements, if you like. People mostly care about being able to configure systems than they do about deploying new systems. HA. Definitely, if you're going to start doing provisioning, being able to make that HA is probably going to be needed. But it's not something, it needs to be solved within the Puppet community, I think. There's a couple of ways of doing it, like I did mention, but it depends on scale, it depends on what you're doing. There's a lot more choices there, I think. I don't know if there's necessarily a particularly right way to do it, or wrong way. Yeah. Probably not, no, not initially. I would like to see it done, I just haven't got the expertise to do it, so, yeah. Yeah, sorry. It's just quite simple. So the installers all configure SSL for you. So sorry guys, the question was about SSL. Why not to configure? Why not to terminate it at the load balancers? The main reason for that is for simplicity. I would have to go in and work out to get my certificates, put them at load balancers. Obviously, that's quite simple. But the installer supports passing in your SSL certificates, so that was just as easy for me. I think you probably could do it. It would complicate things, especially with Puppet, because on the Foreman proxy you have two different SSL certificates. You've got Puppet certificates, and then you've got the Foreman proxy certificates. It just kind of adds another thing. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily wrong. But yeah. So, possible. Any other questions? Does everyone understand the demo? Because I don't know if it was quite, I don't know. Okay.